Hey, Sean.
Hey, Bernie.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so excited because this is the first pod we've recorded since starlighting.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute.
Or a whole lot of hot.
Yeah. But we're here. We're excited. We have an awesome guest with us today.
And before we introduce Landon, let's just remind everybody that we're here on Castle Rock Generations. We're looking at Castle Rock through the lens of two different generations, older, younger. And Sean, tell everyone what we do with Castle Rock Generations.
Yeah. So on Castle Rock Generations, we remember yesterday, we embrace today, and we imagine tomorrow. So it's all about the past, present, and future of our wonderful town that we have here.
And today we're going to talk about something which has caught me by a fair amount of surprise, really has popped up seemingly out of nowhere, but is immense.
Right.
And that's pickleball. So Sean, introduce our guest.
So today we have on the podcast, this is Landon Bellum, my long time friend. We both met each other when we both moved to Castle Rock when we were, how old?
We were both 10 years old, so that was 17 years ago.
17
Wow.
years ago.
Yeah.
And Landon is a real estate agent here in Castle Rock. His job is to sell Castle Rock. But today, we're going to be talking about the awesome pickleball scene that Landon is a huge part of. So he is the admin of he's the creator of the Castle Rock Pickleball group on Facebook, which has how many members?
Oh gosh, I didn't check today. It's probably close to 2,000 members or
Wow.
over 2,000 at this point. It might be a little bit lower, like 1,700, but it's hovering around that 2,000 members. So
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
yeah.
Now, we should tell everyone where we are today. We're in Castle Rock. We're at Butterfield Park. We happen to be sitting right in front of the Butterfield Park pickleball courts, and we have a couple behind us that are playing pickleball. So that's very exciting. And we're going to talk with Landon today about pickleball. And Landon, where I'd like to start is, what happened? Where did pickleball come from, and why is it so big, seemingly out of nowhere?
That's a good. Do you mind if I grab this?
Cool.
Got it. That's a good question. So I'm no expert in the full history of pickleball, but my understanding, based off of the many videos I've watched, is that pickleball actually started a long time ago. I believe in the 80s or 70s, or maybe it was the 90s, but it was the sport itself was created a long time. And I've even heard of some people who played it, some people in their 40s or 50s that played it in gym growing up, and they were like, oh yeah, I've heard of pickleball. It's been around for a long time, but it very quickly in the last few years gained incredible traction, incredible popularity, and has now grown to be it's either the nation's or the world's fastest growing sport. So it is growing at a very quick rate. As you can see behind us, these are the newest courts in Castle Rock. There are, I believe there's 6 pickleball courts here. There are 6 just 5 minutes down the way on the other side of the meadows in Castle Rock. There are 7 on the other side of the highway in Castle Rock. And there are another set of 6 on the easternmost neighborhood in Castle Rock. So altogether, we have almost 40 courts of pickleball in Castle Rock, all of which came into being in between today and 5 years ago. So
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Now, as I look at I played pickleball once myself, totally unsuccessfully, but as I'm looking at the pickleball court, it seems to be a miniature of a tennis court, but that's not entirely true. Can you tell us about the court itself, why it's the size that it is, and a little bit about how the sport is played?
yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of people compare it to a smaller tennis and bigger ping pong, because similar to ping pong, you play with a paddle, not a racket, but similar to tennis, you play outside on a court. So it's kind of a weird hybrid of the two. And you're seeing a lot of people nowadays transition out of tennis into pickleball, out of ping pong into pickleball, out of racquetball into pickleball. You're seeing a lot of people who were born and raised and loved other racket or court-like sports like this that are transitioning into pickleball because it's such a trend, because it's so popular. It does play a lot like tennis. It's very different, though, in the sense where tennis is a very serve-heavy sport where a lot of your skill level is dependent on how hard and how accurate you can serve. Pickleball, when it was created, at least what the rumor is the creator of pickleball wanted to create a sport that wasn't so reliant on the serve. So when you serve in pickleball, you actually serve underhanded, which takes away a lot of your swinging power, a lot of the force that you have. So the serves, although some people do and can have more of an aggressive serve, it's a lot less of a weapon than it is in tennis. So there's a lot of small differences like that, but it does come to be the sport where a lot of it is played very much at the net. There's a lot of volley points where you're doing a lot of very quick hand movements back and forth with your opponents on the other side. Another thing that's maybe a little bit different than tennis and ping pong is the sport of pickleball is very much is the most popular, I should say, in its doubles format. That's where you see the most people playing. That's where it's arguably the most competitive and the most popular in the competitive scene is the doubles format. So I guess you have that in tennis, you have that in ping pong, but it seems to me from my perspective and little experience in tennis that it's more focused and most popular at the singles format, whereas pickleball is more doubles.
More doubles.
Yeah.
So if you look back behind Landon here, you can take a look at the court. That area up by the net, I think that's called the kitchen. Is that correct? So is that called the kitchen because there's some cooking going on up there? And I understand you're not supposed to stand in the kitchen on the pickleball court. So tell us what that's all about.
So yeah, the kitchen, it is called the kitchen. It's if you want the more technical term, it's the non-volley zone, but it has been dubbed to be the kitchen. That court space, as you can see behind us, it's just this little rectangle on both sides of the courts where you are not allowed to be in and hit the ball. There's a very common misconception in the sport. Many people watching this might even believe this the wrong way. The misconception is that you cannot step in the kitchen. You can be in the kitchen all day long. You can be in that non-volley zone as much as you want. You just can't volley in the volley zone. You cannot hit the ball while in the kitchen unless that ball has bounced. So what a lot of people think is, oh, if I step in the kitchen, it's a fault and the point goes to the opponents. That's not necessarily the case. It's probably the biggest misconception in the sport of pickleball. You just can't be in there and start volleying. So what it does is it prevents you to go up to a high ball, stand right at the foot of the net and slam it back down on your opponents. It gives you about I think it's a 7 feet is how big the kitchen is. 7, 9, maybe it's 7 feet. I don't remember how big it is. Oh, it is 7 feet total divided by 2, I think is what it is. So
is that for safety purposes or something else?
I think so, yeah. Because if you had a bunch of tall guys just there lined up right at the slamming the ball down right in your face, if you hit it just a little too high, there is a safety issue there. And it also defeats the fun that can be pickleball where, there's space there that you can't go into to just volley. So it keeps you about 3.5 feet, I think is what the math is, away from the net so that when a high ball does come, you can still slam it. But you can't be right up at the net to slam it back. So yeah, that is called the kitchen. That is the purpose of it. It keeps rallies going longer. It keeps points going longer. It probably does have a safety factor there too.
Now, Sean, you play pickleball yourself.
Yeah, I don't get out as much as Landon does. I try to play when I can. I would say I'm probably at the very novice level of pickleball. But one thing I will say about pickleball is that the first time you play, even if you're not into racket sports or anything like that, you will have fun. It's the beauty of it, and I think this is why it grows so quickly, is because when you go to play it, you go to try it, you have fun the first time, right? And I am not good by any means, but I go with Landon every once in a while and play in the mornings, and he has people that play with him that are just like beyond my comprehension of how good they are. Like I'm not good enough to even understand how good they are. That's the level difference. But I can still play with these guys. And of course, they're clobbering me. But like, I still get my opportunities to shine and I still have fun, even though they're way beyond me. So the beauty of pickleball is that it has a really nice skill curve. It's not steep. It's not slow. It's just it's a nice, even skill climb.
So you can start out with no experience.
Exactly.
Still enjoy the sport. Now looking at Landon, I've watched some professional pickleball on TV, and you look like a lot of the professional pickleball players do. So I'm imagining your skill level is way up there in pickleball.
So in pickleball, there is a skill rating system, right? So it goes from, I guess you could say 1.0 would be someone who only has never played the sport, but is very unathletic. I'm not pointing fingers here. I've never played with you, so I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody. But the 1.0, let's say the bottom, where someone has never touched a racket sport in their life. They're not very athletic. They don't know how to play, and they're learning how to play. And then it goes all the way up to to 7.0 would be, let's say, a pro. So someone who is in the professional circuit, traveling around the country, playing in tournaments frequently, who's at the top of their game, might be a 7.3, a 7.5 or something like that. I've seen ratings go all the way that high.
So people could make a living professionally at this sport?
They're definitely starting to. Yeah,
Wow.
There's the number one players in the world are worth millions at this point due to
Incredible.
their earnings, their sponsorships, and all of that stuff. So yeah, Ben Johns is known as the number one player in the world on the men's side, and Annalee Waters, who is I believe 17 years old now, has been the number one player on the female side for about 3 to 4 years. So she was rocking the #1 spot on the female side for 13 years, showing all these ex-professional tennis players, ex-D1 tennis players who made their transition into the sport, showing them that it's a lot harder than they might have anticipated, especially when you're being beat by a 13, 14, 15-year-old girl like it's nobody's business. So
That's how I would be at pickleball. Now here's something that's catching my attention today.
Mhm.
We're at the Butterfield Park pickleball courts. I'm thinking it's like regular public tennis courts, but there's sponsorship and advertising banners up here that I wouldn't expect to see. Is that because of how popular pickleball is? Is that corporations want to put their logos and their banners on public courts? It's really that big?
yeah, I'd say it's that big on the professional scene. You have huge sponsors like Carvana has sponsored the whole professional tour on the big time leagues. But there are local people sponsoring local courts here in Castle Rock. I'm not as familiar with other courts outside of Castle Rock, like around Parker and Highlands Ranch and all that. But here in Castle Rock, you'll have sponsorships on all the courts here.
Wow.
And they range from other realtors who are sponsoring to chiropractors to all sorts of wellness, different brands and companies. I mean, if you walked around these courts here at Butterfield or at Founders Park or at Parish Park, you would see sponsorships. And it's something that I've actually looked into as well, but I found my own way to kind of get my name into the pickleball scene on the side for my business. But this is something where it's funny because we're here at about 2:00 p.m. on the middle of a weekday and there's only one set of courts taken. If we were to come back here in about an hour and a half, there would be lines out here. These courts are extremely popular. And if we went 5 minutes over to Parish Park, same thing, there would be lines out here. There's even a paddle stacking system. You might not be able to see it in the shot, but when there are lines and all the courts are full, there's a system in place here. You can read on the sign. It's called the paddle system, to where when you're next in line, when you're off waiting to get on a court, put your paddles of all your teammates up, and then you rotate it through. And then when your paddles are the next up, as soon as somebody finishes up their game, it's your turn to go on. They come off, and then they put their paddles into the system and rotate in. So these are very popular courts, and that's why it's attracting a lot of local businesses to advertise and get their names out here.
So here's what Sean and I and Landon want you folks to do as you're watching. If you play pickleball, like this podcast, like what we're doing, put a comment in and talk about your experience with pickleball. I have essentially none, so it's catching me by surprise to see all of this amazing pickleball stuff. But put your comments in. Tell us what you think. Are we on the right track with covering pickleball in Castle Rock Generations? And it's just amazing. I never would have expected to see something like this and have someone with Landon's stature here educating us about pickleball. Sean, what are we missing so far that we haven't talked about with Castle Rock?
I think pickleball represents, as we talked about, it's yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? The sports that have been popular in Castle Rock, I think we have a lot of golfers, and obviously the mountain biking thing we talked about. Oh, got a ball. Here you go. You're welcome. We got the mountain biking scene. We got all these sports, but pickleball really is, I think, where our entire country is moving in terms of sports, right? It's getting vastly popular, and this shows to me the support here that the town of Castle Rock is there for that, right? It's not just an old sleepy town, right? We have all these amazing initiatives and things that are getting built to embrace what is the next best thing, and that's pickleball in my mind.
The reason that it has grown to be so popular around the nation, but specifically in Castle Rock was one of the early adopters of it and has continued to adopt it. As you see, there's so many courts and so many places to play in town. But I think the reason is because anyone can play the sport. You'll see people out here. I've played against women who are in their early 80s on the court playing pickleball and beating up 20-year-olds.
So
totally.
I wanted to ask you about this age issue because, on Castle Rock Generations, I represent the older generation. Why are older folks so good at pickleball? And what is it about pickleball that lends itself to older people playing it well?
That's a great question. And what it comes down to is the understanding of how to play the game. You can get a tennis player out here that played Division I college tennis and picks up a pickleball racket and thinks that they're going to dominate anyone for the first time that has been playing for years. That won't happen. The reason is there's a strategy and there's a science to playing the game. Like Sean mentioned, there's people that I play with that understand the game so well that despite their age and their physical ability can really give someone a hard time that has played racket sports their whole life or professionally or at the collegiate level. there's a strategy to this game that, if known, someone who's younger, someone who's older, or someone who's quite frankly just not in very good shape can exploit to beat people who think that, oh, just because I'm the most athletic and youngest guy in the court, I can beat anyone. That's not the case. There's a way to slow the game down, play it at a very high methodical level, and beat other players. So because of that, and also to answer your question, how can older people get into the sport and be so successful at it? The game is made so that anybody can play it because of the court size. It's not this huge, large tennis court that's really hard to get across because of the size. Because it's smaller and a more condensed version, people can play despite their physical ability or their age too. So it's kind of a mix of the strategy and the size of the court. It caters to anybody. So I've seen young kids play extremely well and beat up on older people. I've seen older people know the game so well and beat up on younger people. It really comes down to how well do you know the game, and can you exploit the fact that your opponents don't know it as well as you do and can't execute it.
So I have a question about this strategy thing about pickleball, because you made a big deal about pickleball strategy. Yeah. Is that secret sauce? Do you guys keep it to yourselves, or is that something you can maybe in 2 or 3 points share a few things for our audience that lead them into better pickleball strategy?
Great question. So the first thing I'd say is go onto YouTube and type pickleball strategy, and you'll find dozens, if not hundreds of videos breaking it down. It's not this secret sauce. What is important is once you look into some strategy and some tips and some things like that, it does take implementation and execution. You got to figure out how to actually hit these shots and play to this strategy so that you can actually use it. It's not something that you can just learn, oh, okay, I need to do a third shot drop now and just go and start beating people who have been doing it for months or for years. But there is strategy. So a few key points is I just mentioned it. One of the things that takes an intermediate player to the advanced level is learning how to execute what we call in the pickleball realm a third shot drop. The temptation for someone, like I said, who might have played tennis for their whole lives is just to slam the ball over and over and over and over again. Well, if you're playing against someone who's good enough at pickleball and has a good feel for their paddle, they'll just sit there on the back and send it back on their backhands or their forehands and send it back to you every time until you miss, until you either sink it into the net, even though you're hitting it 90 miles an hour, you sink it into the net, or you hit it way out of the court and they'll just dodge and look and watch it sail by and hit the fence. The game of pickleball, once you get to the advanced level, is to really figure out, okay, it's not about power all the time. It's about strategy and slowing it down. So what you do when you're the serving players, you hit what's called a third shot drop. It's a nice little rainbow shot. It looks silly when you're watching it. It's expecting a tennis player to slam it every time. It's this little rainbow curved shot on the other side of the net, which gives you time. It buys you time, you and your partner, to walk up to the net and get to that kitchen line. And then you slow it down and you do what's called dinking. So the 2 words today to look up for anybody watching or for you guys is to look up what's a third shot drop and what is dinking. Go watch some videos on that. You'll learn a lot. But basically you get to the point where you, as your team, has slowed the game down to where the ball is just barely going over the net on both sides until hopefully your opponent makes a mistake, hits it just a little too high, and now you can slam it back down on the opponent because now you're up at the kitchen. I'm 7 feet away from you as my opponent. You hit it a little too high, now I can slam it, as opposed to what a tennis player could do in theory that's never played, is just slam it from the back of the baseline every time. That's 20 feet away. It's a lot harder to nail a ball that's 20 feet away when now you're at the kitchen. So,
all right, Landon just gave you guys the challenge. So for our watchers, our listeners, put in the comments if you know what a third drop shot is, or if you know what a dink is in pickleball, put it in the comments. And Sean, how about if we give a prize to the best answer? Okay. Yeah. Fantastic.
All right, I think we're running out of time here, but
Landon, thank you so much for joining us today on Castle Rock Generations. Sean, great episode. I'm so excited that I may have to try and play pickleball again.
Gotta get you out here.
You will
play some games.
Oh, I'm happy to come out here anytime. I'm already out here too much as it is. So.
All right, fantastic, Landon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.